Digital Economy Department for the Economy.
Heath Harvey, Head of Local Economy.
Thank you, and thanks again for coming in to see us. Minister, unsurprisingly, perhaps we've got some questions to ask you about Blue Islands. I'm going to hand over to Deputy Wilson just to start this section.
Thank you. Minister, you've now strengthened the resilience of the island's air travel. Can you tell us what you expect to see in terms of improvement in value for money?
From Loganair coming in. So I think Loganair, the principal and immediate benefit is the much larger fleet that they have, which from a resilience perspective, you quite rightly touch on, gives them a much more resilient ability to operate in the island. We saw with Blue Islands earlier this year that when they had 2 aircraft with technical issues, it had a massive impact on their fleet because their fleet was only 5. Loganair have a fleet of 38. And so were they in a situation where they had 2 aircraft with technical issues, their fleet is much more able to cover that. They are obviously, well, not obviously, but they are a company that, to my knowledge, is not indebted, which gives them financial resilience as well. They are part of the general distribution system from a ticketing perspective. So that means that, you know, if you go onto an online flight ticket sales website, to book a flight from Jersey to a destination, let's say in Norway, because I know Loganair fly to Norway, you know, you should automatically be seeing, you know, Jersey to Edinburgh with Loganair, then Loganair to Oslo or Tromsø or wherever as well coming up. So you should be able to see those flights coming up from Jersey. With Blue Islands, they weren't part of the general distribution system, so they you couldn't get that automatic sight of connecting flights. And I think another thing, which is something which has been a subject of conversation over the past few years, is the issue of compensation. And so as a UK airline, Loganair are part of the UK's system with regard to compensation when they have cancelled flights. And we know that both Aurigny and Blue Islands are not part of that system. And now anyone travelling from Jersey on Loganair can travel in the knowledge that should the flight be cancelled for various reasons, they are entitled to compensation along the lines of the UK directive with regard to that and the EU directive with regard to that. So it has a number of benefits ranging from resilience through to compensation, as well as a much wider network of routes.
And when you were preparing your negotiations to strengthen the island's resilience, was Loganair the only airline that you talked to about what the island needed?
So they're outside of Blue Islands and Loganair were the only 2 airlines that we spoke about, or spoke to that I know of. But it was different, I would say, to preparing the island for resilience. It was a case of speaking to Blue Islands about the troubles they were having, understanding, you know, what the likely outcomes of that were, and it changed over the months that the conversations happened. Understanding what Blue Islands were doing, because they were trying to seek a sale. And obviously there was a point at which they weren't able to, they believed they weren't going to get that. And so we spoke to Loganair as another party that had already said they were interested in flying from Jersey. They said they were doing the Jersey-Southampton route next year regardless. And yeah, they were the other party that we spoke to.
Okay, thank you. You will be aware that the Controller Auditor General had made some observations and comments about the way in which the loan repayments had been monitored and performance managed. What difference do you think there will be to the way in which this contract is managed in terms of securing the best value for islanders?
I may be wrong, because we are treading very much into Treasury area as opposed to my area. So, you know, I have to caveat it with I'm not the minister that's closest to it in that respect, and so I may be incorrect, but to my knowledge, there is no contract between us and Blue Islands, except perhaps on the initial contingency phase. If there is one, I imagine it's there, because outside of that, Loganair are operating under Jersey's open skies policy, and so we aren't contracting with particular airlines to do just, you know, one route or to have a public service obligation on a particular route. So to my knowledge, there isn't a contract. Do stop me, officers, if you know otherwise, but to my knowledge, there is no contract with Logan, except perhaps for that contingency.
Can I just ask, obviously in your capacity as Minister for Sustainable Development, retrospectively, do you think the government made the right decision with the COVID loan for Blue Islands, or do you think it should have maybe been done in a different way? Maybe the money was put up front, a bit similar, say, to what Guernsey did with Condor, because it seems as though that the loan has had quite a few implications for Blue Islands since the pandemic, where they've really struggled to then service the debt that they owe to government.
So I don't know about any implications for Blue Islands or consequences of Blue Islands that you're talking of, but at the time, because I was in Scrutiny at the time of the loan being made, at the time it was a case, and obviously this was done under previous government, but the loan was there in order to maintain Jersey's connectivity. Yeah. I had imagined that the Treasury Minister at the time and the Chief Minister at the time, Economic Development Minister at the time, probably discussed whether it should be a grant or a loan. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's one of those you're caught between a rock and a hard place. Yeah. If you provide a grant, then obviously you don't have to worry about it being repaid. No. I imagine the political narrative then may have been, well, why are you just giving them £7 million or £8 million? So I can understand politically why you might then say actually a loan would be better. The downside to a loan is that there is the repayment side of it. Yeah. And so obviously Blue Islands had repaid some of the loan. I do understand that the terms of the loan were flexible in terms of repayments, and certainly in the latter months of Blue Islands' existence, you know, I don't think extra payments were taken. No. And so, yeah, I do think you're between a rock and a hard place. I think it was the right thing to do to give the capital injection to Blue Islands to keep them flying through COVID. I think that was absolutely the right thing to do. The form of that capital injection, that's where the rock and the hard place bit. There were advantages to a grant, there were advantages to a loan. Richard.
It's worth just also adding that the shareholder of Blue Islands at that time had also passed away. Blue Islands didn't have ready access to capital full stop. So you had the effect of the pandemic, but you also had the sad death of the principal shareholder. So they didn't have access to capital in the normal way.
Yeah. And one of the implication, or one of the consequences of that fact, was that the trust which ended up owning Blue Islands following the death of the shareholder, I believe the terms of that trust were that it couldn't invest any further into Blue Islands, and so you had a principal shareholder in this trust that was unable to inject any more capital themselves. So that's this year's situation that we were faced with, was the shareholder couldn't itself put any more capital.
No.
Can I just ask, how often and at what points were health checks done onto the performance of Blue Islands and the viability of it, given the fact that there was so much money being owed to Government of Jersey?
I think that's very much a Treasury question. It wasn't, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but that wasn't our responsibility.
Yeah, the loan wasn't advanced by the department. The loan was advanced by Treasury and working with Ports of Jersey directly. So we weren't involved in the loan or the active management day-to-day of the loan.
So when Blue Islands were offered more money or were loaned more money more recently, including this £1.5 million and then the drawdown facility that the Treasury Minister, did your department have no conversations around why that money was needed and whether to give that?
No, I was involved in conversations going back to June about, so with the Treasury Minister, with the External Relations Minister, with the Chief Minister, we were involved in conversations about the situation that Blue Islands was in, this summer, and about the options for going forward. Now, part of it was obviously in the summer, in June or July, had Blue Islands failed then, there would have been far more significant disruption, and many more thousands of islanders and travellers to the island would have had their plans disrupted.
Why would they have failed?
Than they were in November.
Why would they have failed then, or indeed at any point?
We were having cash problems.
But why were they likely to have failed?
Because they didn't have the cash flow to keep flying.
So the reason that Blue Islands has gone into liquidation isn't because they couldn't operate and didn't have the cash flows. It's that government decided to call the money in, basically.
No,
that's not my understanding of it at all. No.
So could you talk us through the way in which the Blue Islands collapsed in the last.
So I understand why you're saying it. So I think the ultimate document, I think that the ultimate kind of reason that Blue Islands couldn't continue beyond 3 weeks ago, whenever it was because the Treasury Minister wrote and said that we wanted the money back for the loan. I think I'm right.
And that's
so
what,
in that sense,
that's caused the collapse.
That was the actual, official thing. But the reason they were in the position where they had significant problems themselves was that they did not have the cash flow to continue going through without capital.
But can we not agree then that it's a question of whether the debt was serviceable? And Blue Islands, I'm sure, would say that we had an understanding, we were led to a position by government where there was money given to us for operating, and that we would have been able to service the debt, and in the long term we would have been viable. So it's ultimately government's pulled the plug on Blue Islands, which has led them to go under.
I don't know that that's the case. I don't know that that's the case, and you are speaking to the wrong minister to know whether that's the case. You would need to speak to the Treasury.
But you were involved with the conversations around the loan.
Yes, but at no point did I hear people say any time, "Oh, if government treats the loan differently, then they'll be able to carry on."
But
regardless, because the government had stopped asking for money.
But you do accept in saying that we're not going to give you any more and we want that money back now. That's obviously going to make them go into liquidation.
I think that was more an official thing rather than because they could not, to my understanding, Blue Islands could not have continued without a capital injection of some sort. So calling in the loan was neither here nor there. I imagine, from a liquidation perspective, you might have to write that about calling in the loan because you're a creditor and you might have to make that very, very clear. But the conversations I had were always about the cash flow situation and not about the loan's implications on that.
I will come to Deputy Wilson in a moment. Can I just put what we've been told by someone close to Blue Islands that the £500,000 of funding that was provided to Blue Islands just before its collapse was the consequence of a question posed by Government of Jersey officials to Blue Islands as to whether they wanted additional funding and whether and that they didn't approach government for the £500,000, but they said if you're offering it, it would be quite nice to have £500,000. That would enable us to do certain things like to buy fuel and prepare for the winter. Is that your understanding of the?
That's all news to me.
Were you involved with that latest loan though?
Yes, I was involved in the conversation a week before, or a week to 10 days before Blue Islands ultimately went into liquidation, where it was decided amongst a group of ministers to extend a £500,000 loan.
So you're here with your officers, so maybe your officers can clarify, did Blue Islands come cap in hand to government saying, look, we're desperate for this extra money to see us through the winter, or was...
Not to me, no. So the first involvement I had was understanding that Blue Islands had been advanced a loan of up to £1.5 million to be paid in 3 tranches. The first tranche of 500,000 had been paid out. There was a request for a second tranche to be paid out in the days following the minister's decision in the end not to advance that money. And it was the decision not to advance that second tranche of £500,000 that left the Blue Islands directors in a position where they had to determine whether they were a going concern or not. That was decision was communicated by the Treasury Minister on the Friday evening. Blue Islands then ceased operations later that evening and then gave notice of liquidation early in the following week.
But why would government have offered a facility to say you can draw down, I think, £1.5 million in these tranches, then to say on the second tranche you're not allowed to have it?
Because at the time, government was assessing the options of continuing to put money into Blue Islands, bearing in mind how much money had gone in different ways to Blue Islands since the pandemic, between the loan, between this £1.5 million, between landing fees as well, and there are also other taxes that were in terms of social security contributions and so on. There comes a point where you have to say, can this business turn around or not? In the background, government was working on contingency to secure these air routes. And what fundamentally changed in the final few days before the Treasury Minister communicated to Blue Islands that no more public funding would be available is that the cost of contingency and the availability of that contingency basically came into line. So we got to a crossover point where it was a better investment to secure contingency and have flights running within 36 hours than to continue funding Blue Islands in a way that may end up being an open-ended commitment.
So was it not the case government was effectively just buying time to make sure Loganair could get in? Then you pull the plug on Blue Islands and
Government
say...
didn't pull the plug. Government decided just not to put any more funding in. The fact that Blue Islands had no other resources to be able to call on either banks, shareholders, or advance any other merger opportunities of their own, that's something you have to take up with the directors
It's
of Blue
remarkably good
Islands.
timing, isn't it, that you keep Blue Islands on a life support machine all the way through the summer. You wait to make sure that the half term is being served by Blue Islands. You promise them more money. And then on what you might call Black Friday, the lowest point in busyness for the island, you say, OK, let's pull the plug on Blue Islands, and Loganair mysteriously ready to step in.
So you can speculate as you wish, Chair, in terms of the timing of it. What I'm saying is there's a copious due diligence that sits behind this. It was commissioned by Ports of Jersey and the Treasury that supported the decisions that ministers made at the time.
I mean, do you concur with
due
that?
diligence is also really important. So as we were able to do more and more due diligence, both ourselves and I assume Loganair were on their side, we began to understand more and more this financial situation at Blue Islands. And so I think even in that last week, if I remember rightly, the situation from the first week where it was decided to, provide this £1.5 million and £500,000 tranches, the situation in terms of our understanding of Blue Islands' cash situation developed further.
And what was that?
We understood a week later that they were in a worse position.
What was that new information?
Well, that we understood they were in a worse position to the one that we understood they were in. So the situation was even worse than we believed it to be.
What was the information you found out?
It was about their cash flows.
They can't trade if they can't pay their debts. So I think the real question here is whether they were even able to pay their debts had they pulled down on a loan. So
Just not sure why you wouldn't have established that before you even gave the first loan.
Again,
that's the Treasury.
it's because, unfortunately, Chair, we don't live in a perfect world where all the information is available to you at once. Information comes to you in periods over time. Right. And as you understand that information more and as you're able to gain that information, you're more in a better position to make the decisions. Obviously, we were even, like say, in that last week, the information at the end of that week compared to the beginning of the week had changed. And we understood that Blue Islands were in a worse situation than they were previous to that.
Minister, can I ask, you mentioned about the meeting that you attended in June, but beforehand, did you have any concerns about Blue Islands struggling to service the debt that it had?
Only general concerns, and that had gone from all the way back to COVID, where they were asking for a £7 million loan. But there was no specific. There were general concerns. I don't recall any specific concerns. I think the timing bit is important. And I think the Treasury Minister said this very well in the States Assembly. Our responsibility as government our duty as government is to make sure that we have connectivity, and that is exactly what we did. And so we did need to have connectivity through the summer. We did need to have an airline not die on us in the summer. And it is better that event takes place in November rather than previous. I wouldn't say that it was engineered for that, but when the information came that showed they didn't have sufficient cash flow, one of the reasons they didn't have sufficient cash flow was because it was November, because November is the month of lowest sales. So they are physically getting less cash in that month than previous months or any other months. And so it is natural, and that's why we saw Eastern Airways
But that's presumably
go into
why
liquidation
they were
2
given the
weeks
loan,
early.
though, wasn't it? They were given the loan because, winter's going to be a quiet period and they need the loan.
Which loan? Which are you talking about? The £1.5 million?
Yeah.
Yes, and that was why it was decided. I think it still felt at that point, when the first £500,000 was given, that there was a belief that actually Blue Islands could still make it through within that week. Okay. We understood more about their cash situation and realised that it was very unlikely. And then Richard's description of the better investment for government then was Loganair, a contingency, for Blue Islands to go into liquidation, as opposed to us continuing to try to bail them out.
And remind us how much was given to Loganair in the short term.
So, so Loganair, we have committed to £1.5 million for the startup costs. To my knowledge, but this knowledge is from about a week ago, I haven't asked since, we hadn't paid any of it at that point. But it's up to £1.5 million.
Deputy Wilson.
Thank you. Can I just come back to the couple of things there that you've raised? So So what we're aware of, I think it's December 24, where it was raised that there were some risks to Blue Island's business. I think
November 24.
November 24, is it? Thank you. So the question that we're trying to find the answer to is what the risk appetite was then for actually either supporting or not supporting the airline. And there were a number of decisions that were taken around new routes to what was clearly a failing airline. Could you just explain to us why that investment was made, knowing that there were issues with cash flow, knowing that they'd not paid their COVID loan back, knowing that they were actually looking, to sustain their business but were struggling to do that? Could you just help us understand what the rationale was behind that and how you believe that improved Blue Island's position, or you hoped it would improve Blue Island's position?
Sorry, you said that investment was made. Which investment are you talking about?
Sorry, in terms of supporting them to develop the new routes to Paris and also to Germany.
Okay, so my understanding is that there was no support particularly given, except I understand £11,000 was given from Visit Jersey,
Yes.
possibly.
Yes, it was.
For marketing. That was all. So I believe that the commitment to Blue Islands on the Paris route was purely underwriting. So if they sold no tickets, or didn't sell as many tickets as they thought they could. So my understanding of the Paris route is that it was ultimately profitable because they never called on that underwriting. And so the underwriting didn't take place. I believe the only money that was given for Paris was the £11,000 from Visit Jersey.
What was the underwriting? What was the?
I couldn't tell you what the limit of it was, but it was an underwriting commitment.
So your officers happen to know?
It was through
Here's
Ports of
another
Jersey.
figure from the route development part, Heath.
It was from Ports of Jersey.
I don't recall it, but we can.
We can write to the panel and give you a
for
number.
you.
What's the order of magnitude? Are we talking a million?
Hundreds of thousands. No,
I
I have
150,000,
150 or
yeah.
something like that in my head.
But the fact it wasn't drawn on means that was a viable route. So it's they were making a profit from the Jersey to Paris route.
That's what I take from it.
And it was the first year they were running it, right? This year.
Yeah.
And it seemed to be popular with the public, didn't it? It seemed people.
Hence the fact we didn't need to use the underwriting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The
Is
German
that a
route.
contradiction to the fact that Blue Islands wasn't performing generally well? They managed to set up a new line. There's a sense that there are green shoots here. They might be able to set up other lines in Europe. Which wash their face. Is that problematic? Is that a disappointment for you as Minister who's been trying to build up?
It's disappointing, that Blue Islands failed, and it served the islands for 20-something years, and it's a disappointment. The routes themselves, I think this is one of the things, is the general understanding that I was given about all of the routes, including its UK routes, was that they were profitable, that Blue Islands was running profitable routes, but because of the scale of its network, just a fleet of 5 aircraft, when it hit the problem of 2 aircraft with technical problems this year, it devastated its bottom line because there's just no resilience in the company itself. That's what I understand the issue was. It's not the individual routes. And so I am concerned, I'm trying to get to the German ones in a sec, but I am concerned that there's a narrative going around about they were overextending themselves. Nobody, to my knowledge, except the board of Blue Islands, is in a position to know whether they were overextending themselves or not. If Blue Islands felt that Jersey to Paris was overextending themselves, it would have been right for them to say to Ports of Jersey, we do not want to run the Paris route because we will be overextending ourselves. That wasn't the message that Ports of Jersey got from Blue Islands, and actually it turned out that I believe the route was at least able to wash its face, if not profitable. I believe the German routes are, I might be wrong, but they're just charter routes. So I don't believe there's any scheduled, and I don't believe there's any funding for them at all.
Could I talk about the EasyJet route to Birmingham, which was effectively a very profitable route for Blue Island? And could you explain how EasyJet became involved in establishing themselves on that route? And did you, as Minister, suspect that might well also impact on the viability of Blue Island's business at all?
I have to say no to any of it. I think there's got to be a fundamental understanding here. Jersey operates an open skies policy. So any airline that wishes to fly a route to Jersey is able to fly that route. The government does not come in. So I have had 0 conversations with EasyJet about their routes to Birmingham. or anywhere else, to be honest with you. And they chose to fly Jersey to Birmingham. That's their choice. I don't believe that government
So there was no
had
government
any
subsidy or
conversation,
anything?
nothing, to my knowledge, and I ask, please step in if I'm getting this wrong, because I don't want to give the wrong information.
Was any subsidy given at any point to help them set up a route from Jersey to Birmingham?
Blue Islands or EasyJet?
EasyJet.
So those would be commercial discussions that Ports of Jersey would have directly with an airline. So the relationship with EasyJet covers multiple routes. With Blue Islands, it's narrower. With British Airways, it's narrower again. So it's probably a conversation best had with Matt Thomas at Ports of Jersey.
Would you not be told about that if Ports of Jersey was subsidising a route in or benefits in kind?
We don't manage Ports of Jersey's financial position and
what about when it
dividends
affects
back to government.
What about when it affects government's interests? So government has effectively loaned millions of pounds to Blue Islands, which it owes back. And if Ports of Jersey were to make a decision to subsidise a new route for EasyJet to run from Jersey to Birmingham, which then we've been told caused a 1.5 million annual adverse impact on Blue Islands, and therefore that's not helping.
I think it's really important. So whilst we haven't got the CEO of Ports of Jersey to confirm it, my belief would be, because no one's told me otherwise, that we are not in any way subsidising the route to Birmingham, and Ports of Jersey are not in any way subsidising the route to Birmingham. I'm happy to be corrected if they are, but I don't believe they are. I have not been told at any point that they are. Blue Islands and airlines of that size, those regional airlines, they do play a role in effectively warming up a new route. So, and this would be the truth on any route. So take, Jersey to Paris. If Jersey to Paris is run by Loganair, let's say, if they continue to run it, if that goes very well, it is totally natural for a larger airline such as EasyJet or British Airways or Air France to look at that route, see that it is running very well, that the yields on there and the booking numbers are very, very good, and then seek to establish their own competition on that route. That's what I believe happened on the Jersey to Birmingham route. That's kind of one of the roles that these smaller airline plays, is basically starting a new route.
Yeah.
If it works, then larger airlines will come in.
I get that.
And Jersey's government has no view on those larger airlines coming in.
I think what would be helpful for us to understand in the longer term is different roles played by government, Ports of Jersey, and then when a new competitor comes in, which effectively they were, is whether they were solicited. So did Ports of Jersey go out and actively encourage competition, or were they approached? And I think it does make a difference in a small island where there's a limited market, because we could have a scenario here whereby there's competition, but then they become the dominant player and the monopoly, and then they put prices up. It's tried and tested methodology. So is that an area of concern for you? That
it's not been an area of concern, because I don't think that's been happening, and I think we can see, particularly with EasyJet, that they have low prices to Jersey's connectivity to all these airports in the UK, and where they have a monopoly, let's say they're the only airline doing Jersey to a particular airport in the UK, we haven't seen their prices rising particularly. So I don't think that's how EasyJet operate. But I think it's also, we've got to come back to, you mentioned, Chair, the Ports of Jersey perhaps asking, encouraging other airlines to take on routes, and Jersey's got an investment with an airline, in this case Blue Islands, through the loan. Is that against each other? I think this is that gets to exactly the point as to why Jersey should not invest in an airline, except in the most extreme circumstances.
But you have invested in an airline.
Yeah,
you've invested in Blue Islands.
We should not do as others do, which is protect our investment over better connectivity.
Or is it not the
case? So shunning better connectivity in place of protecting an investment is a place that will harm the economy as a whole, and we should not go down that road.
I did just want to ask on that. I mean, we're not here to propose alternative policy, but is it not the case that there's also the interaction between an open sky policy? So it might be difficult to own your own airline if there's an open sky, but if you have control over your airspace, your airport, and you can issue licenses, and it's an option to own an airline, then that's the Guernsey situation is very different, isn't it? It's a different starting point.
It is, and I think it's an inappropriate starting point for Jersey, because we've already seen, I believe, £80 million over 10 years has been poured into that airline by the government. And the other side of it is you end up with the potential situation where you're trying to protect your investment, and the cost of protecting that investment is better connectivity for the island. But that is a really bad place for Jersey.
Do you not accept that if you're going to give £13 million effectively through government and port fees to an airline, you're better off owning some of it, like Guernsey do, rather than having
I
to...
disagree, because
write
we
it
would
off.
end up, my fear would be that we would end up protecting that airline so much that we would lose connectivity elsewhere. And as a result of that, you would end up with higher prices and less connectivity. That would be the death knell for various parts of our economy.
So the last
I
question
think
then,
it would be an appalling situation for us to
is
be in.
government happy just to write off the... Is it £9 million that's owed from Blue Islands? Is government happy to write that money off?
Government's not happy to write any of it off. Government wishes that this hadn't happened, but we have to deal with the realities of what has happened.
And what's the lesson that's been learnt?
I think lessons have been learnt about the importance of having contingency and getting that in place. I think it's been incredibly successful that we only had effectively 36 hours of disruption for the death of an airline. And I think one of the biggest lessons is that we do need to understand where the risks are in our connectivity.
Can we pause there and go over to the cyber questions? I'm aware that...
I know, I'm aware that I could feel Deputy Scott get worried about
the provisional sum for the underwrite of the parachute was 129,180.
Okay.
Just to save you having to write to us.
None of it got paid.
And none of it got paid out, correct.
Okay, good, thank you. I'm not saying we won't come back to this, but let's see how we get on.
So you're welcome, and you are welcome to propose alternative policy. I think that is the role of scrutiny. By
No,
the
we
way.
just want to understand, but I think it's... thank you. So, Assistant Minister, again, thank you for being here. We're aware that there's the Cyber Security Jersey law, which is lodged. And how does it align with the cybersecurity policy framework from now for the next 15 years and the broader sustainable economic development strategy, please?
It's an important framework in terms of supporting cybersecurity in our island as envisaged by the cybersecurity policy framework, which sets out policy ambition. The framework itself is a continuance of a previous cybersecurity policy that anticipated the establishment of the Jersey Cybersecurity Centre and the bringing in of the law. So the cybersecurity policy framework has, if you like, a sort of broader reach than the law, because it's actually setting out areas of work outside the law as well as within the law. Within the law, it starts with a focus on these operators of essential services, setting out a statutory framework for them to ensure that they implement certain security measures and report cyber incidents, so that, if you like, our essential critical infrastructure isn't so vulnerable that we can actually try and protect it in that way. It contemplates that the nature of these duties could potentially be extended through further regulations made under the law as the cybersecurity culture that we hope to evolve in this island becomes more established. I mean, this is very much a first step to a journey. And the way that I've actually likened it is that when it comes to being online, we're talking about the use of technology. There was a time when the motor car existed and you didn't have to have a license, you didn't have rules of the road, all that sort of thing. Nevertheless, it was a potentially dangerous and destructive piece of equipment. What can happen through cyber incidents and attacks, we've got is potentially very damaging to this island's well-being, and we are already seeing a very massive increase in things like kind of attacks by, let's just say, not so friendly states, but also ransomware attacks. To the point where you can even download ransomware type things to make your own attacks on the dark net. It's an area that we need to keep pace with.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. In terms of the cybersecurity centre itself, can you tell us how it will have powers beyond issuing guidance, and also how will compliance be monitored through the centre?
It's very important to explain that the Cybersecurity Centre is basically a support area and coordination centre. What it isn't is an enforcer. It is not a regulator. So to answer your question, it doesn't regulate. It does have a role in advising the Minister in terms of what might be appropriate security measures to ask operators of essential services to take. And indeed, possibly the Minister in, I would say, extreme cases could potentially act as an enforcer, but to give advice in that respect, because sometimes there's a certain amount of, if relative forensic work, just explaining what standards haven't been complied with or not, and that needs to be looked into.
Do you envisage that may change over time, particularly with the advent of
I think, yes,
AI
to some extent, because Jersey's following in the wake of other more sophisticated jurisdictions, and we do have the ambition to develop in this area. And indeed, we have a whole finance industry that is quite important to our economy, that is really reliant on cybersecurity. So having everybody in this community begin to acknowledge that they have a role to play and to begin to assume some sort of responsibility is an important part of this work, in particular when we refer to cybersecurity standards. So again, we have got regulators in different areas like data protection. There could be a data breach, and there's a certain amount of work that's going hand in hand. What sort of standards of cybersecurity should we be expecting our operators, essential services, to be implementing, and from there, other types of organisation?
And do you have any assessment of the costs associated with the impact this law will have on small businesses in particular, for example?
Well, then they're getting a free service, essentially, to support them. So,
but if they have to step up their own security measures that are proportionate, and surely that's going to be a cost to them. Do you have any sense?
I would say down the line, if we get to the point, and at some point I expect that we will, but this is a cultural development exercise where you are saying to certain businesses, well, we expect you to have this as a minimum in terms of cybersecurity if you are going to operate your business through the web, then there will be a related cost. But then on the other hand, you might equally say you would expect any business to make that investment, because, if you are subject to a cyber attack, somewhat as we've seen with Marks and Spencer's, Volkswagen, you can't trade.
I suppose the question is, have you, as a government, made any assessment of the costs around the implementation of this law, particularly on small businesses?
Yeah, at this stage, in terms of small business, because that's not really the focus.
Fine.
That's not what we've done, because the focus is on operator essential services. So we need to roll that out. We already are working in terms of issuing guidances with them. We've been consulting with them. And indeed, when we come to the point where we're expanding law, we would expect there to be consultation phases there. It's not a matter of just suddenly saying, right, now it's you.
Okay.
It's intended to.
And just to add to what the Minister said, a bit like Deputy, the Telecom Security Framework, this is the cost of doing business on the island, in Jaguar, Land Rover, M&S, the Co-op, etc. The cost of doing business does necessitate having security.
measures in place. Yeah, okay, thank you for that, Mark. Can you tell us that, you know, are you able to give us, are there any businesses that may be struggling with this in terms of any, you know, undue burden that's being placed on them by the law being implemented?
This has been extensively consulted with. We've had 2 public consultations in 2022 and 2024, but on top of that, anybody that we could imagine would be an operator of essential services, there's been discussions with them. So, which really has shaped the nature of this law. So, as you know, we've explained, it's been quite important that JCSC is very much there as a coordinator and a support centre, you know, primarily, and the real obstacle in terms of coordination has been that we haven't actually had a law that requires people to share this information, otherwise they've got no right to. So, so I think, you know, any kind of objection that I personally have been aware of has been more that the law's not been in place. And I have had certain people in the cybersecurity area just saying, you know, where is this law? Why haven't you delivered it yet? Well, you know, here we are. Just for that reason, because it needs to be in place to actually achieve a really important part of what we might call cyber resilience, which is sharing information to anticipate types of attacks that may actually follow up on other organisations.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything you wanted to?
I was just going to ask, is there a concern that any businesses will struggle with this ultimately, and that this will be just another added cost at a time when some are struggling with both red tape allegedly and also costs?
Yeah, there concern, we've been really conscious of a potential concern that it could be regarded as red tape insofar as there's a reporting requirement. 2 aspects to that. Number one, if you actually are the subject of a cyber security attack, you are putting a lot of energy into trying to deal with that attack. So having a number of different kind of areas or agencies that you need to report to, if you add to the stress of managing that. The cybersecurity strategy that we've published has said that to the extent that we will be aiming to minimise any potential overlap there. So the most obvious overlap is you get a data breach, you need to advise our information commissioner as well as potentially the JCSC, so the extent to which there could be some.
There is just one question, if I could just ask on that very quickly. Will you test the resilience, or will you find how resilient the island is if there are breaches or if there are attacks on the systems that will be subject to this law?
So when you say, will you, who essentially test the resilience?
So the test that you mentioned there that about cyber resilience, and the question is, how do you test that? You've put a law in place and you've put arrangements in place, but the question
really the
is,
extent to which
how do you test it?
information is communicated about potential attacks to enable people to just, you know, be extra vigilant on that. So in a sense, if you like, what you're saying is, how do we prove that that actually had an effect? You know, would that attack, if it spread in that direction, that may be difficult to prove, but we will be able to say, well, we had this knowledge, we shared it within this time, and that did make people more vigilant, and maybe we will be able to collect incidents of people just saying, oh, okay, that, you know, we received this email, this phishing attack, and so that's been the pattern.
Yeah, certainly awareness raising is very much an important function of the JCSC. Just to go back to the Chair's point about the costs to business, it's worth reminding ourselves that the cost to JLR was 1.9 billion and rising. So essentially the message is the cost of not protecting yourselves as a business is not something you want
What's
to
GLR
contemplate.
for the record?
Jaguar Land Rover.
Yeah, thank you.
I think as well, just, there are two elements. There are statutory duties for operators of essential services, so it's a limited set of businesses. The first element is that they must implement proportionate cybersecurity measures. So to the question about resilience, that the JCSE can assess whether they have an appropriate set of cybersecurity measures for any one organisation. And then secondly, the other element is reporting when there is a breach, to report within 24 hours to the Jersey Cybersecurity Centre. That in itself is a point I was making in the past, was that's not a big report. It can be an email, very simply an email.
That was how it's going to follow up.
And so, they're really light measures in that respect.
It would be a high-level report, just, look out for this rather than, and then you've got to do this and this.
So can I just point in fact, is it 24 hours or 48? What's the...
It's
24.
24. Okay. And
Which
that's less than...
aligns with what happens in the UK right now, and as you might expect, a number of organisations in this island have branches of UK organisations already.
I think 24 is quite important as well, because a notification is something as simple as an email, just saying we have been breached. In itself, that notification
It was going to be longer before, wasn't it? It was a recent
yeah.
change.
Originally, well, the law has been a long time in discussion, so in terms of, we started with 48 hours and then people just got more comfortable with the whole idea.
But also the UK brought it down to 24 hours, isn't it? Right,
Yeah.
so and I think we did raise concerns about it being too long, so we're pleased to see it come down.
Yeah.
Yeah, as am I think, because otherwise you could have up to 48 hours of...
Waste of time.
and also those attacks spreading to other organisations in Jersey.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Assistant Minister, thank you for that. We appreciate the
And
update.
thank you, Chair, for accommodating me.
I appreciate you coming.
Thank
Sorry you can't stay longer.
Thank you.
Minister, can we go back to Blue Islands?
Of course.
Did you have any questions at this point? I just wanted to, otherwise...
Yes, please. If I could, I just wanted to come back to the issue around the public service obligation, if I could. So, would you expect, do you still have responsibility for resilience in terms of emergency resilience as the Minister responsible?
Do I have responsibility?
For emergency resilience? as well?
I have responsibility for connectivity and for food supplies in terms of resilience.
Okay, so the question still applies then. So in terms of the public service obligations around that, and we haven't got a PSO agreement in place with our airline that is likely to supply our food and goods. What's your view on that? Do you think we should have a public service obligation
Not
in
really,
place?
because very little of our food comes via air. I'll say 90%, I don't know the exact figure, but probably more than 90% of our food comes via sea.
98% comes by sea. 98% comes by sea.
98, right,
Yeah.
okay.
And medical supplies are usually by sea as well, as in medications, things like this. So I don't think there is a kind of a supply reason for having a PSO. It's also important to note, and I have double checked this, is we don't have the ability to designate a PSO, so there is no law under which I could or anyone else could designate a public service obligation route by air in Jersey. And that's a consequence of the open skies policy that was adopted, I think, in 2008 or thereabouts. And so there is no way for me or anyone to designate a PSO route in Jersey.
Well, how would that apply, sorry Richard, to medical emergency, for example? Would there not be a public service obligation for an airline to step up on that basis?
No, so emergency evacuations off island, there is a sort of air charter service that provides for that. I think in the most extreme cases, or when we've also got bad weather set in that limits otherwise air operations, there are military or Coast Guard support as well. So the key part was routine health transfers to and from Southampton, and ensuring that that's adequately protected was about having the connectivity. So, there was a sort of background concern of, potential airline like EasyJet saying, well, I think they now serve Southampton, not for Jersey, but elsewhere. If they come in and say, well, we're going to run 3 services a week as EasyJet between Southampton and Jersey, that would be really harmful to whoever else is operating Southampton, Jersey, had that been Blue Islands. in terms of taking volume traffic away. Where Blue Islands and now Loganair provide a really valuable job for us is providing not just the connectivity but the frequency each day to and from those smaller destinations like Southampton or to Bristol that couldn't be supported with a much larger aircraft as operated by people like BA and EasyJet.
Okay, so in terms of, and again, it's just about helping us to understand the context of this. So we don't have any public service obligation in place. We don't have a contract in place, but we believe we've got a resilient service to the island. What gives us confidence, apart from the fact that we've talked about scale and we've talked about connectivity with other islands, what else would give us confidence that the management and the performance of that service to the island will be, you know, appropriately monitored, will not incur any particular risk to the island? Who will manage the risk around it?
I think with open skies, we know that the routes can be profitable. The routes were profitable for Blue Islands had they not had the issues that they encountered with fleet and the lack of resilience in the supply chain for spare parts and so on. Those were the critical problems that really brought Blue Islands down, because it wasn't necessarily a bad management team and the routes weren't the problem either. It was the fact that a very small fleet weren't able to carry a significant inventory of spare parts, and the supply chain was incredibly strained for spare parts for that aircraft type. With Loganair, you've got an airline with 38 aircraft, a significant proportion of which are narrowed down into 2 or 3 categories of plane types. So they're able to carry a bigger inventory and have more buying power in the supply chain, which helps. But open skies means if the routes are profitable, there's an increased likelihood another airline comes in to do the routes, just as Loganair have come in and were already interested in serving Jersey. I think all of this is the inverse, if I may say, of arguments that have been made about the ferry concession agreement, which effectively is a public service obligation by virtue of the agreement, and where we have all of that visibility around financials and scheduling requirements and so on. And that's because 98% of the island's consumption comes in by sea: food, pharmaceuticals, fuel, and so on. So that's a critical supply chain line, and that's why that's managed in a very different way. And it's why we're not open seas, but we are open skies.
So does that mean with an open services, an open skies policy, there is likely to be more competition for routes than
That's up
rather
to the
than sustaining
it's up to the market.
ability in the routes?
It's up to the market to determine. So we believe the routes are profitable, but they're profitable if it's the right airline and the right plane type and all of those other factors. So, you know, EasyJet have made a good effort at a number of UK regional routes with their aircraft being served maybe several times a week, or in some cases several times a day. They operate a very different model in terms of the cost per seat for them compared to an airline like Blue Islands or Eastern Airways, which recently collapsed,
I don't know.
or Loganair.
I don't know that EasyJet fly to Southampton for any routes.
No,
they don't.
I thought they did, yeah.
And I think this is another thing as well, is it's understanding the different business models of different scales of airlines. And EasyJet's business model is very different to Loganair's business model, which is again different to Blue Island's business model. And so Loganair is definitely positioned itself as a supplier of regional connectivity, principally to the UK, a bit to Scandinavia, and obviously now to Paris possibly as well, which they didn't do before. That isn't in the main an area that we understand EasyJet or other similar airlines are looking at. It's not the type of routes that they want to fly. And so our understanding is that there isn't the question of competition from that sector of the air industry.
What would government's role be in that if that competition emerged?
It's a really good question. I think it's I'll be candid. First time I've thought about it, and I think, you know, what we would have to do if an airline like EasyJet were to say we want to do Jersey Southampton, our policy would be to let it happen. But I think we'd have to have conversations with EasyJet to talk about the importance of the medical supply routes, and if they were to be taking revenue from Loganair in this case, to the point where Loganair were thinking of pulling out, that we would expect EasyJet to be able to put on those sorts of, you know, because we've got to remember we talk about them being medical flights, but they're not dedicated medical flights. They are, and always have been, just regular passenger flights that take medical patients on them. And so, you know, this is different to Finisterre, for instance, which does the Orly route for us, but they do medical flights and medical evacuations specifically for the Ile d'Ouessant. We don't have any situation like that. When we need a medical evacuation, we have helicopters that we can, you know, rescue services that we call on. So I don't think that, you know, in the event where somebody like EasyJet came in to operate Jersey-Southampton, I think our initial reaction would be to sit down and have the conversation to make sure that they were able, should they end up being the dominant player, possibly the only player on that route, to take those, would they be happy taking our medical patients to Southampton Airport? I think the biggest issue for, and Richard's touched on it, would be because of the size of their airplanes, the regularity of the flights, you know, it's a very short route, Jersey to Southampton. Would they do that kind of 5 times a day? I'd suggest it's unlikely. And so those are the sorts of conversations we'd have to have. But, you know, touch wood, it's not a route that I believe EasyJet or other airlines, there are other similar, and British Airways, etc., have ever shown any interest.
Thank you.
Minister, can I ask a question about the current aircraft that are grounded in Jersey? So can you tell us how many of Blue Island's aircraft are currently, in your understanding, at Jersey Airport?
I've heard that there is 2, but I don't know that. That is only something I've heard.
Any further advances on 2?
I think it's 2. I think there's 2 on the ground at Guernsey. There should be a 5th one somewhere.
I was going to say there's a 5th lane, so it's either going to be 1, 3 or 2.
I heard 3, but we'll find out.
Okay, maybe
so those planes are not owned by Blue Island, are they? They're leased.
that's correct.
Do we know who they're leased by?
Oh, sorry, leased from.
From, yeah.
No, I don't know. Okay. I'm sure we do as the government. I'm sure Treasury know who the lessor is, but I don't.
What do you think the chances are of Ports of Jersey getting all of the money back that they're owed in landing fees? I think last figure we had was about 3.2 million.
Yeah, I have no idea what the chances are.
Anyone?
No, I mean, Ports of Jersey will submit a claim to liquidators in the usual way, and until all of the claims have been staked with liquidators, there'll be absolutely no idea of what level of potential payout there might be once the liquidators have taken their own fees out of the equation.
What's the relationship in terms of ministerial oversight of the airport between yourself as Minister for Sustainable Economy, the Minister for External Relations and Treasury Minister? Do you all have some kind of interaction with the airport authorities?
Yes, in different ways. Yes. So,
what do you describe your role as?
My role is about very much the kind of the operations in terms of the route operations, that side of it. The Minister for External Relations is very much actually, it's not with the airport directly, it's the regulator, so the Office of the Department Director, I couldn't think of the Director of Civil Aviation, the DCA as we call him, sits under the Minister for External Relations, and he regulates the airport and their operations. And then Treasury has the shareholding, side of sorts.
How are Blue Island allowed to rack up £3.2 million of unpaid landing fees and port fees?
So my understanding is that because of the cash flow issues that Blue Islands were having, the decision was made. From the top of my head, I couldn't say whether it was at the instigation of government or not. I just don't know. But ports held off charging those fees in order to avoid a kind of when I say catastrophic, I mean that in terms of financially catastrophic situation around Blue Islands earlier in the year, potentially in high season.
So do any of you know, in the UK, there's something called the Civil Aviation Act 1982, Section 88, 2 of that Act, gives the ability for airports to impound aircraft where fees are outstanding and not release them until the fees have been paid. And they can also do that. They can ask that money to be paid by the owners of the aircraft, even if it's not the operator which owes the money. Do you know if that applies in Jersey, that law? Do we have an equivalent, rather?
I was going to say, I doubt the law.
The law doesn't apply, but do we have
I doubt the law itself applies. If we have an equivalent, I imagine it would be in the ports kind of incorporation laws. I don't know whether we have the ability to impound in the way that you're talking about. I haven't checked the law.
I understand Guernsey does have an equivalent of that law. Does anyone know that? Because there was a headline.
All I know is, having read in the media, that Guernsey said that they were seeking to recover it with legal grounds. So I don't know if they have legislation or if it's contractual terms between Guernsey Airport and whoever the airline operators are.
So we were told that it was taken off the statute in Jersey.
It may well have been.
And do you know why?
If it was, I imagine it was around the ports of the incorporation of ports, which would have been 2012, 2014, that period. So it would have been then. I imagine that's what would have precipitated it if we had that law before, and if we don't have that now. I don't personally know whether we do or don't.
Cross purposes. I understood what had been taken off Jersey statute book was around the transition to open skies. So previously having protected routes, when Jersey moved to open skies, it was some years later then the legislation that would have allowed routes to be designated was allowed to lapse. It was repealed.
That was about 2012 as well.
I wasn't aware there was anything around, exercising any sort of lien over an aircraft or impounding an aircraft, whether that was revoked in any way or repealed.
Have we ever impounded aircraft before, do you know?
Not that I'm aware of. But it'd be an operational
I've
matter
not
for
heard of it.
Ports of Jersey.
So can I ask, you said that this would be with the liquidator, but the aircraft are not owned by Blue Island, so there's no point in the aircraft can't be part of what's being wrapped up in terms of Blue Island.
No, the money is
assets.
owed by Blue Islands to Ports of Jersey. So Ports of Jersey will put a claim into the liquidators of Blue Islands for the landing fees that are due.
Do you know if there are negotiations going on currently between Ports of Jersey and the owners of the aircraft to try and recoup money?
So again, that would be a shareholder matter in terms of the financial relationship between Ports of
Would you
Jersey
not be
and
expected
Treasury.
to be informed of that, Minister? Do you know about that?
So I've heard this morning, indirectly via yourself, Chair, that there is a conversation, but I've only heard that. Again, it's not official information that I've heard.
Would you expect that if Ports of Jersey, if the planes are in Jersey, let's say there were 3 of them, and the money is not owed by the owners of the planes, and Jersey doesn't have any law by which to demand payment, which the money is owed by Blue Islands ultimately, that Ports of Jersey shouldn't be restricting access to those planes, should they?
I don't know.
But as a principle,
I don't have a view. You're going into very legalistic areas, and I don't know the law in these areas, so I'm not going to give an opinion. I don't know.
could I ask, have you been briefed not to say anything at this meeting?
No.
Just
No, you're talking about an area I don't know very much. Sorry, no, I don't know anything about the laws around the impounding of planes and liquidation laws in terms of the seizure of assets.
Can I
and
ask
who
about-
is liable? I just don't know. So
Can
I
I
can't
ask about the conditions of use of the Jersey Airport? There's a document called Conditions of Use of Jersey Airport 2015.
Yeah.
Are you aware of that document?
I haven't read it. No.
It's in the public domain. Do your officers know about it?
No.
So there is an article in there where it says under 7.2, the lien or the lien, depending how you want to pronounce it, that Jersey Airport shall be entitled to levy fees in respect of any aircraft or property for storage or otherwise during the period of exercise of the lien. And the Jersey Airport may further exercise a lien in respect of unpaid charges, costs, fees or other liabilities. So what do you think what would your interpretation be of that?
And would you repeat it, please?
I don't think I'll repeat it, but are you, I can repeat it if you want.
Because I can't remember what you said, so you could repeat it, please.
So it says that Jersey Airport shall be entitled to levy fees incurred in respect of any aircraft or property for storage or otherwise during the period of exercise of the lien. And Jersey Airport may further exercise a lien in respect of unpaid charges, costs, fees and other liabilities as it sees fit.
So to me, it sounds like they're saying Jersey Airport, if you leave an aircraft at Jersey Airport, then charges can be levied against that aircraft. I don't know exactly the definition of a lien, except I think of it as in terms of some sort of bond, a loan.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me, though I am not a lawyer and I am not the minister responsible for recovering monies in any way at all in Jersey, it sounds to me like those terms and conditions are saying that if there is some sort of loan, in that case perhaps unpaid fees, then there is a claim over those aircraft.
Do you think the public deserves to have an answer about whether or not Ports of Jersey has a right to be able to get all of its money back from the owner of these aircraft? And at what point would, you're aware I've asked the Treasury Minister, and I sent her an email, open email last week with all states members copied in, not had a written response to that yet. Is that an area of concern for you? That
I think what's most important is that these processes play out first, and then afterwards we can understand what the rights and wrongs were. I don't think, well, in terms of whether it's getting monies back, whether it's going through liquidation processes, all of these processes around Blue Island's liquidation, I think they need to play out before we start getting into public commentary, because I have a funny feeling public commentary might end up leading to greater adverse effects for the government of Jersey and the public purse than a lack of public commentary.
Is it not right that Ports of Jersey and ministers need to know that Ports of Jersey have a legal basis on which to pursue a third party for any money that they might or may not owe? Do you think that's important for public confidence? And
I think if there is a legal basis, then it's up to Ports of Jersey to exercise that or not. It's their decision.
But if there isn't a legal basis, they shouldn't be pretending there is, should they?
I don't know. I don't know that they're pretending whether there is.
No,
You're making some accusations.
No, I'm not.
It suggests to me, and I'm not going to get drawn into accusations on a subject matter that I'm not aware of. I know of your email, and that's pretty much all I know about it.
But as a minister,
I don't know anything else. I cannot respond to you on that.
As a fellow minister with the Treasury Minister, are you not concerned, as somebody with oversights for ports as well, that you want to make sure that they're acting with virus and that we get the right sum of money back for Ports of Jersey? So if it's 3 million, we should be getting that back. If we don't have a right to get anything back from those companies, we shouldn't be asking them for money. Are you concerned that we get the right amount of money back from the right people?
I'm sure that Ports of Jersey are acting within their legal remit entirely. I have no reason to think that they're acting in any way ultra virus.
How can you be sure if you don't know what the law is?
Because I've no reason to believe that they're acting in an ultra virus manner.
Would you do us a favour as a panel and ask and assure yourself that that is the case and maybe report back to the panel?
Or you could ask the Treasury Minister yourselves from a scrutiny perspective.
Well, we have asked her.
But she's not responding, so we're asking you. It's a quarterly hearing.
Yeah.
I know you value transparency.
Yeah, I do.
Can I just ask, Minister, when were you made aware of the Ports of Jersey waiving the fees?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. I have known for some time, but I couldn't tell you
so
when.
Before your meeting in June, you were aware of?
I'd say that is, I definitely knew at that meeting in June.
Yeah.
I couldn't say whether it's before, and genuine, I'm not
No,
I genuinely couldn't say, but I know at that meeting in June, I was definitely made aware in that meeting.
And do you agree with the decision that the Ports of Jersey made in terms of waiving the fees of Condor as well as Blue Islands?
Oh, Condor, did you say?
Yes. Yeah.
So I do think that Ports of Jersey, I think, have played a very good role over the years in many different ways of helping the government of Jersey maintain connectivity.
Yeah.
And I do think that one of the ways they do that sometimes is, backing away from fees where an important provider of connectivity to the islands needs that help.
Yeah.
I think that is an appropriate way to operate.
Yeah.
It doesn't help Ports of Jersey, obviously, because it affects their financial situation. But I think that is kind of that part of that Team Jersey idea that sometimes we need to pull together to kind of ensure that events go as well for Jersey as
And
possible.
I think it's worth noting that, Deputy Andrews, that at the time of Condor's issues and deferral of port fees that Ports of Jersey agreed to, they agreed to that on a goodwill and good faith basis. Certain other ports took measures to actually take security over Condor's vessels that would have seen those vessels being impounded at a moment's notice in other ports, and therefore denying us our supply chain.
Yeah.
So, in that context, Ports of Jersey acted responsibly in the wider interests of the island, and I have no reason to doubt they'd be doing any different now.
So wider interest of the island is a much better way of saying Team Jersey. It's a much more eloquent way of saying.
The Ports of Jersey are an arm's length organisation.
It's a state-owned entity.
Yes, but do you feel that such decisions where you're looking at Ports of Jersey deciding to waive the fees should be directly reported to you as soon as practicable, or do you also feel that they should maybe consult with you before they then come to a decision to do that?
Good question. I think, again, I'm the wrong minister on this, so I think the appropriate minister mainly for that is the Treasury Minister, because ultimately, as I said, the impact on ports is their financial performance, and that's definitely the domain of the Treasury Minister. I think from my perspective as Economic Development Minister, I think there is that conversation to be had about, Minister, is this airline or is this sea line, critical? Do we need them?
Yeah.
You know, we know they're in trouble. Would it help if we lifted their fees for the moment and just backed off away from their fees? I think that's the appropriate question to be asking the Economic Development Minister.
Yeah.
I think the financial impact side of it needs to be determined by the Treasury Minister.
Minister, sorry, can I just ask one final question
Of course.
about the assets that are on the runway at the airport? Given that you have oversight of Ports of Jersey, what would your expectation be about how they should deal with those assets and the disposal of those assets?
Okay, as I'm going to, and it isn't me being awkward, Chair, I promise, this isn't an area I've been briefed on, so
No.
I don't know under what vires those assets are at the airport. I don't know if it's voluntary, if it's, if it's impounded. I don't think it's impounded, but I can't be 100% sure. So they are there. I think it is appropriate for Ports of Jersey to see if they can get payment to some extent for those aircraft. If there is, if it is appropriate to get it from the owners of the aircraft, because that's where the terms and conditions and possibly even the contract between Blue Islands and that owner of the aircraft may even stipulate it. So I think Ports of Jersey have a right, and it is appropriate for them to look at ways that they can recover fees. And if the aircraft play part of that, then I think it is appropriate.
And would you expect? Sorry, would you expect a full cost recovery, or would you?
I think that's an impossible question to answer, because in fact I would expect the opposite. I would not expect, if I had to say where the greater probability is, I'd say it's on not a full cost recovery. So if you were, and that's just from my not experience personally, but reading in the media over many years, in any liquidation scenario, I think 99.9% of the time you do not get 100% of your money back. So I would doubt that in this liquidation scenario there's any way that ports could get 100% of their money back. But that's from experience rather than any knowledge of this specific issue.
Going on. Okay, so and just finally, what sort of briefing will you seek from Ports of Jersey about the situation? What would be the content of that briefing that you would expect?
So no, I think it is appropriate. Now I'm more aware of the situation. I think it is appropriate that I do undertake, but I think it's more appropriate for the Treasury Minister, because it's definitely the financial side of it, to understand what the situation is with regard to assets that are at the airport and Ports' understanding of them.
And Mr. Corrigan was going to come in, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, the directors of Ports of Jersey, as a limited company, have a fiduciary responsibility to act in the best interests of the company and its stakeholders, including the shareholder. So in that regard, I'm sure they'll be pursuing any debts that are owing through the right channels and legitimately, and there's legal recourse on both sides to be able to achieve that outcome in a fair and equitable way. So I think, to the Minister's earlier point, I think that is best left to the contractual parties to resolve that as appropriate as to whether there's a legal claim or not. And I think speculating on what may or may not be a valid legal claim is something we probably shouldn't do at this stage or in this forum.
Do we know how long the process will take at all? Have you a sense of?
My understanding is that certainly claims to the liquidators, I think there's a closing date later in December for claims to be staked with the liquidator, and then they will have to work through the affairs of the company to see what realisable value there is, and then see what distributions, if any, are available to be made.
So, but do you accept that whilst it might not be, in your words, I think we shouldn't speculate as to the validity of the claim, it's entirely reasonable for scrutiny to ask what legal framework exists under law and under conditions of use of the airport for this kind of scenario? That's entirely a valid question.
Yeah, I'm saying we're not speculating on the outcome, I guess, is the point that,
but
that I'm
do you accept
making,
that it's important?
And the parties have a legal right to seek redress.
But do you accept, for public administration purposes, it's important that we know and the public knows what law exists in Jersey and what conditions of use of Jersey?
Well, I think you've already referenced an airport.
Yeah, it's in the public domain.
Terms, conditions or documents, so that's available for the public to view.
What I would say is I don't think, if there is an ongoing negotiation, I don't think us speculating about the kind of ins and outs of a negotiation that we're not party to at the moment, and the legal varies, lack of legal varies. I don't think that is helpful to any
Well,
other
I didn't-
negotiation, because none of
I
us
didn't
are
start
parties to
speculating
that.
until I didn't get an answer about a basic legal question.
Yeah.
That could have been answered at any time, and it's not been answered.
In
so
my case, I only answer it because I'm ignorant of that.
that's fine. Thank you.
I only don't answer it because I'm ignorant of it.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're going to move on to a new section, so thanks for your questions and your answers on that one. What we'd like to do for the remaining time, which I know is limited, is really move on to the export strategy. It's not something we've talked a lot about in the past. Minister, could you talk us through how you are progressing with the 6 strategic themes contained in the export strategy? Perhaps list them for us.
I don't know if I'd be able to list them all for you off the top of my head. But,
Or I've got them, but it's just for,
So-
I can talk you through, just so it's for the public really. So we've got data, export support, raising the profile of export, presumably connectivity, France and Europe, and international engagement. Do any of those inspire you?
I think they will inspire me. They're exactly the sort of thing that I would love to see Jersey doing a lot more of. I think Jersey has a huge export market because of the financial services industry, but one thing that we have, and also tourism, which is effectively an export market. But I think one of the things that has happened over the course of my lifetime is that the kind of goods and that side of exports has diminished. And that's also because of the kind of the lopsided nature of our economy, but that is changing. Yeah. And I'm really pleased to see that, you know, now, and this wasn't the case 15, 20 years ago, but now the non-financial services side of the economy makes up 60% of the island's economy, I think, and that's grown from, it was about 50% 20 years ago. It's now 60%. And I think it's really important both for a variety of careers in the island, because again, not everyone wants to sit and work in an office, but also the resilience of the island, that we do have an export and strengthen our export industries. Jersey's always thrived on exports. That's, as a tiny island, that's where our economic gain has always been. And I think it's important. And just one of the stats that I did check before coming in here was 2024. Outside of financial services, 2024, in terms of goods, 2023, we had £113 million worth of exports. In 2024, we had 161. So that's an increase of £48 million in exports. That's a significant increase.
What was the time gap there?
So that's 113 million in 2023.
Yeah.
161 in 2024.
Yeah.
And it is worth it. It's Appendix B to the GVA stats. It's the annual business survey that information comes from.
Just so we know what we're talking about, if we put services aside, not because they're not important.
Yeah, no, but these are goods.
These are talking about goods. What do we export in Jersey in terms of the headlines?
So obviously our biggest headline exports would be potatoes. That's about £40 million a year on its own. But we also export a significant amount of dairy products. And they are going worldwide now and increasing significantly. We also have other elements, and this is where the frustration of our statistics labelling. So I can see that £20 million in 2024 came from the export construction, mining and quarrying. So that could be stone. I'd love to know more about it. 29 million came from wholesale, retail, repair of motor vehicles and motorcycles. So it's just frustrating that the labels used by statistics are not clearer. But those are I think the main ones. So manufacturing had £36 million. And I do see that there are various manufacturing businesses that are growing in Jersey as well, which I think is really interesting.
In what areas? What we producing?
One of them that I spoke to recently was in the energy area, and they were creating both solar panels and also underfloor heating, which can be manufactured here and exported. We also have areas, I know, and it is still small, but we also have the export potential of both the medicinal cannabis industry, which has been exporting all year, and also that kind of biopharmaceuticals element, which is somewhere which we can grow over time. But at the moment, the non-cannabis side of that, the exports are negligible, but would hopefully grow in time.
Can I just ask, so you've given us the recent growth. I mean, I think it's pretty impressive growth from 23 to 24. That seems to be much more than inflationary.
Yes.
If we go back to pre-2012 when LVCR ruling came in,
Oh, well, yeah.
how do the stats compare to that time period?
I have to confess, I haven't checked out the pre-2012 period. I would really be pleased to. More candid in my desire to go off and report back to you on that one.
And presumably those were the golden days, weren't they, in the modern sense, when we could export, carnations, but also there was that loop DVDs, which of course is obsolete as a format now, I suppose, anyway. But it's become increasingly difficult for people, certainly, and maybe businesses to export, to post out. Is that an area of concern?
So I think, LVCR in itself was obviously, it's an import-export business. You're importing the DVDs and then selling them out. So in that sense, to say it's got less value, it was very valuable at the time, there's no question. But I think on-island production, whether that's through growing or through manufacturing, and then selling out is preferable. I don't know whether that's just me having a sense that producing on island is a good thing, or whether economically it is preferable. I couldn't be sure. But I think we're now in a situation where rather than just import-export, what we're doing is actually production in Jersey. We're doing more production in Jersey and then exporting of that production. And it has been led by the agriculture sector, there's no question.
Thank you. Any questions from the panel? No? Okay. Deputy Wilson?
Yeah, it was just around when you talked about some of the areas where, there's been growth. How is that translating into things like building up the skills base in Jersey? And, where is your connection with that agenda?
So for me, I really am committed, and I hope that, the next Economic Development Minister is the same. I just think we do need to diversify the number of ultimately career opportunities in Jersey through diversification of the economy. I think it makes for a more rounded society, and I think it gives opportunities to people in area. The more opportunities we can create, the more likely people are to stay here. I think one of the biggest drivers for people leaving the island, when young people leaving the island, is careers that they can't fulfil in Jersey, therefore they can fulfil elsewhere. So just the diversification of the economy I see as a good. And I think manufacturing and export, I think, plays a dual role as well, because I think it also puts us on the map in the way that a tiny islands might not be on the map. And so there is an economic benefit, but I think there are really clear social benefits to this kind of export, and production and export, I think, is genuinely something that it makes you proud. I can't think of a producer, an area which produces something which is not proud of what it produces. And I think Jersey's we're very proud of our agricultural produce, I think, but there are many other things we can be proud of. And I think the fact that, we are now going into more technical manufacturing and things like this, and seeing that, like I said, this underfloor heating, things like that, I think is something that islanders will grow over time to be more and more proud of as well.
Do you think, from an economic development point of view, that the diversification will retain young people in the island?
Yeah.
And do you think we're creating the right economic conditions to support young people to develop skills and capability in the island?
I do. I really strongly do.
Where do you see that most effect?
So it's really interesting. I'll come back to agriculture. So I've seen it hugely in agriculture, where we now have smallholders who tend to be younger. Not all. It depends what you mean by young, but they tend to be younger. And we've seen kind of 60 new smallholders set up in agriculture, and you can almost feel the relief for some of the people who have gone into there, that they now have a route into agriculture through this smallholder route. Whereas previously, the idea you get together £8 million to buy a farm and become a commercial farmer, it wasn't a career opportunity. Now we have a way of those smallholders becoming commercial farmers. And so there's a route into agriculture which just wasn't there 3 or 4 years ago. But we also see it in other areas. We have so many good artisans in Jersey. The Christmas market just outside here, you see some of the quality of the work that's there. And the ability to, Chair, the ability to take that perhaps from a job that you're doing outside of your day-to-day 9 to 5 job and turn that into your career, I think that's really fulfilling. And I just think for islanders, young islanders who grow up and feel that there aren't many opportunities in Jersey, to feel that there are opportunities which speak more to their personal skill sets is just so much more likely to keep them here. Or make them think, even if they go, because I am a big proponent of go and experience the world, but please come back. I think that's something which ultimately, and I do go from personal experience in my 20s, what was I looking at? I was looking at not being in Jersey because it felt like the career opportunities weren't in Jersey.
Do you think that some of the capability that you've developed in the form of loans and funds has targeted that particular group of people, or do you think maybe something needs to change around that? For example, Better Business.
Yeah, so
how do you think that's tackled that?
I think the Better Business Support Package has helped businesses as a whole. It hasn't helped entrepreneurialism directly because it's not targeted at the entrepreneurial. You have to be an existing business effectively to tap into it. But there is the skills and apprenticeship, money. There's £1 million there for skills and apprenticeships. I have to say I am disappointed that it has not been taken up more clearly by businesses in Jersey, and there may be reasons, and over the next month or two I want to try to understand the reasons why it's not been taken up, because there's a pot of £1 million to upskill islanders of all ages. Apprentices would be younger, but then the other side of the pot is for all ages, all parts of their careers. I would like to see employers training their staff. We have a pot of £1 million to increase that training. I would like to see it being used more than it is at the moment.
And would that stimulate an export kind of philosophy, or do you think that's about sustaining the in-island position around day-to-day delivery?
So I think the way it's set up at the moment is more around the day-to-day kind of upskilling of yourself. But there is no question, one of the reasons why the skills part of the £1 million was very much aimed at enabling individuals to say that they wanted to do something. And through their businesses, they can then encourage their business to take that money on, and train them into different parts of their business. I don't think it speaks directly to exports, but again, the apprenticeship side of it may well do. If you are a manufacturer and you're looking to train somebody up because you want to expand your production base to be able to export, then this can help you.
Minister, can I just ask, so I think we've moved on from the export strategy to the wider economy and apprenticeships, which is fine. And you've talked to us about a lot of aspiration there, but what are your targets and measurables for the creation of new jobs in any of those diversified industries?
So genuinely, we don't have actual numbers that we would like to see, and I think it's because we're starting from such a low base that we are looking to see just increases. So we don't have actual individual targets.
And are there any industries that you're targeting, like we'd like to see growth of jobs in those areas?
Yeah, so we'd like to see growth in agriculture. I'd like to see it in manufacturing as well. Tourism is definitely an area that I'd like to see. And tourism, whilst it takes place here in Jersey, is an export market because the money comes in from outside.
So if we take agriculture, how do we square the circle of the industries with very tight margins? They tend to rely on imported labour, probably minimum wage or thereabouts, and often accommodation which is on site. How do we make that attractive to a wider workforce, including younger people and locals, perhaps?
So you're saying outside of agriculture, you're saying?
Well, no, I'm saying in agriculture.
Oh, in agriculture.
How do you? And in fact, the drive is often the other way around. We want, agriculture might want fewer workers, but more productivity. Automation.
And it has done. One of the big success stories, productivity success stories of the last 10 years has been the agriculture sector. Its productivity has increased enormously. And actually one of those reasons is because as a result of that, because it's mechanising and automating in many different areas, it does have less of a need for workers kind of in the field per se, and very much has very clear roles for kind of management of farms and farm managing. And so there are absolutely career paths where people who perhaps don't want to stand, an islander goes to school in Jersey, comes up, we have to put our hands up. I didn't want to pick produce in the fields day after day after day when I grew up. And I think it's true that lots of islanders don't see that as their future. But there are now routes into agriculture, which are more at the kind of management level of agriculture, and Farm Jersey definitely helps people there and helps them understand through the Cultivate programme, helps people understand the options available to them in agriculture.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were leaning in.
Oh, no, sorry.
It's just general interest.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, no, I thought he was trying to signal that you wanted to say something.
Deputy Andrews, have you got any?
No.
Any? I think we'll have to draw a line, but Deputy Wilson, you can have the last question if you want to.
It was really just about, how do you think the economy's doing? And, have you done any surveys which compares, the beginning of your tenure to the position now? And
So I think it's really interesting. Obviously, it's amazing how words change the way people think. So I'm often thought of as the person with the economy, Jersey's person for the economy, the Minister for the Economy. I'm not. There are two of us, principally, and if you count the Treasury Minister, there are three. But there is Deputy Gorst, who looks after financial services, and then what's called the local economy, which is effectively everything outside of financial services. That's the area I focus on. And I set out back in 2022 saying that one of the problems, the financial services industry is the reason we are a wealthy island today, in the way that we are today. We've got a huge amount to be grateful for. But one of the issues around the financial services industry is that a lot of its profits come through the interest rate mechanism, and those interest rates are set by the UK, the Bank of England, elsewhere. And so we knew during COVID and after that, when we had 0% interest rates, we knew that the moment interest rates went up, which was out of our control, it's done by the Bank of England, that you would suddenly see a massive boost to the productivity and the economic growth of the financial services sector. But equally, those interest rates, as easy as they can be put up, they can be slashed. And then you'll see a sudden downturn in the financial services sector. Nothing to do with Jersey at all. It's just a product of the way that industry works. So I set out in 2022 and said that I wanted to grow the rest of the economy to enable us to have a more resilient economy and to be able to see growth outside of this interest rate kind of element. And we have, it's slow, and I don't think people ever understand just how slow it is to change things in an economy, but it does take a long time. And I was really pleased to now perform in the GVA statistics from this year's economic report in October, that the non-financial services sector part of the economy, so everything that I take responsibility for, has grown by 3.3%, which is a really significant amount of growth from that's 24 over 23. And that was a really significant amount of growth in a mature and developed economy. 3.3, if you're getting 2%, you're doing pretty well, but 3.3% was genuinely good. And that's because we turned around agriculture. It's because we are seeing growth in that manufacturing. It's because we are seeing, I think construction actually did quite well in 2024 as well. So there are various areas. And from my perspective, to your question, that was one of the most pleasing things that I've seen, was this 3.3% increase in the local non-financial services side of the economy, because that was significant growth. And that's 60% of our economy.
And do you think that's sustainable still?
Yes, I do. And I genuinely think that we have a huge amount of work to do on the productivity front. The Future Economy programme is set up to increase productivity. But I think that the Better Business Support Package has played an important role in stimulating investment. That's been one of the most pleasing things to see as well, because it's a shame that government has had to trigger it, I would say. But, the chief economist said it a while ago, a couple of years ago, Jersey has a very low rate of business reinvestment. That's a problem, and it's something that we need to change. And so if government has to do something like the Better Business Support Package to try to change that narrative and try to change that way of thinking, then it's the appropriate thing to do. And the fact that we've seen more money, rather than just be matched 50-50, we've seen it kind of 33-66 in terms of the amount of money the government's put in, and then the amount of money that the private sector's put in. It's kind of 2/3, 1/3. So it's exceeded our expectations in being matched by private sector funding.
And your forecast for next year?
I would hope, I don't think we have a forecast for next year, but I would hope to see at least the same levels of investment. I also think it's quite important. One thing, so a lot of that investment has gone to kind of IT, so businesses spending on IT systems. A lot of it, they are all capital programs in terms of building that side of things. We know that the construction sector, so £1 that government has had matched becomes £2. that £2, if it goes to the construction sector, becomes £16, because the construction sector's got one of the best multiplier effects of all industries in Jersey. I think it's 8 to 1, so £1 in, £8 out. And so we're seeing that kind of £2 million the government's put in, it became 2.8 in the end, is being circulated in the economy to a great impact. Government's also done a ban, if you remember, on consultancy services. That did, I believe, have an impact on IT consultancies particularly. And so actually, it's not an intention of the policy, but actually where perhaps some spend has been withdrawn through government withdrawing its spend, actually the investment that businesses are now by buying new IT systems and that sort of thing, which has been triggered by government but not entirely financed by government, has helped, I think, fill that retreat of government from that sector.
Thank you.
Or replace the government's
Thank
role
you,
in that
Minister.
sector.
Any further points that you'd like to tell us?
No, just reiterate that I think it's under notice that actually the non-financial services side of the economy grew quite significantly last year.
Thank you. I thought you were going to tell us that you're doing a great job, which
I'd never say that.
Minister and your team, thank you for coming in today, and obviously thanks Deputy Scott who's left now, but we appreciate your time.
No, thank
and we'll see you next week for a busy week.
I think you'll see me in about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But
Don't tell anyone,
on a
that's
separate
secret.
matter.
We're going to stop the film.